Good evening, brethren. I am going to feature a video on my channel that was produced by the Gocc, which is the Gathering of Christ Church, Hebrew Israelite Church that has been exposing a lot of the satanic lies that have been going on and are getting us back into pre-Constantine Christianity. Without all the paganism, and back to the Hebrew roots, the truth of the Torah and the Tanakh. This presentation was actually taken off. YouTube says it was taken off by the channel. I've seen the video a few times, and I really don't see any fault in it whatsoever. There's a bunch of great information on it, and the reason I'm presenting it on my channel right now is because I believe this information needs to get out there. It's about electromagnetic frequency, basically attacks. There are both inadvertent and on purpose attacks that are happening to the general consensus in the United States and pretty much abroad as well. All over the world it's happening. And what they did was they put together a very, very extensive, informative, and source-driven PowerPoint presentation. So Nuclear Renaissance TV is going to go ahead and feature it. If anybody from the Gocc sees this and does not want it on my channel, please message me. I will be glad to take it off for whatever reasons you have. It's your material. Keep in mind this is for review purposes, and I really, really pray that it answers a bunch of questions for people that seem to be under the quote-unquote targeted individual or gang stalking phenomenon. It's really not what we think. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on. It is a definitive attack against people for whatever nefarious reasons. It's coming up from our own government, or rather the deep state existing within the government. So without any further ado, please take the time to check this out, and may the Most High bless all of us and lead us back home to Him in Yeshua's name. Amen.
To the Most High. We have a powerful PowerPoint today with Officer Sean, which is going to be doing a PowerPoint call, a presentation called the Invincible War. Okay, so it's going to be a powerful presentation. You know, Officer Sean and Officer Kenny, they're involved with the Health Committee, doing research and finding out from a health perspective, and just how the enemy is attacking us, because the enemy knows that, you know, our bodies, our temple, and they are attacking us in different kind of ways. So he and Brother Kenny and Officer Sean and Officer Kenny put a PowerPoint together, and also I'm pretty sure everybody else within the Health Committee helped and we did research. So without further ado, let's give Brother and Officer Sean a hand up. All praise to the Most High. And the Invisible War. All right.
Right. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We got a lot of information to cover, so please feel free to take notes, and if you need any more additional information, we have all the sources available for you. Right. One of the things we have to understand is that we're at war, right? And it's not that we can see our enemy sometimes. Sometimes our enemy is invisible. So we have to be mindful that we have to be always mindful of what's around us, and you know what's attacking us, right? Exodus 1, chapter 9. Want to read that, brother?
All right, we're reading from the book of Exodus, chapter 1, verse 9. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we are.
Right? So this goes back to when we were in Exodus, right? They said that the children are more mightier than we are, meaning that we had a certain zeal about us. We had a certain power within us that we couldn't retouch. So they recognized that. So what did they say?
The people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we are.
Come on.
Verse 10. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply.
Right?
And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies, and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land.
So they wanted to deal wisely with us, lest they join to our enemies. So you wouldn't think they would do anything to benefit our survival, right? Dealing wisely with us is, implementing different strategies to try to take us out slowly, right? So one of the things that we have to be mindful of is that there's radioactivity around us, right? Where does this come from, right? Basically, we're going to get a basic understanding of what radiation is. We're not going to go too in depth. I just want everyone to be on the same level so that we can expound off of that. All right, come on, brother.
What is radiation? The word radiation arises from the phenomenon of waves radiating, i.e. traveling outward in all directions from a source. This aspect leads to a system of measurements in physical units that are applicable to all types of radiation.
Right, and we're going to deal with the adversaries part of this radiation, right? We understand that there's a light that's emanating, right, and that light is Christ. We're going to deal with the enemy's aspect on how he uses that same technology to deal wisely with us, to try to take us out. Come on.
Radiation is a fairly general term that can be used to describe the transfer of energy through space away from a source. There are three basic types of radiation. These include alpha, beta, and gamma radiation. Each radiation source is unique in the type of radiation it emits and its risk to humans.
Right, so there's three types of radiations, right? And we're going to get into the understanding of this is how they set up, how they read the different radiations, right?
Read. Starting with the letter R. Radioactivity refers to the amount of ionizing radiation released by a material.
Now, ionizing radiation is radiation that can actually change the genetic makeup of your cells, right? So you have non-ionizing and then you have ionizing. Ionizing deals with, we're going to get a little bit more into that, but it deals with the manipulation of your cells and your DNA. It can actually change that, right? That's why when you're inside a doctor's office, you go for an x-ray, they throw the lead vest and they go run and scurry behind a wall, right? Because these things can actually change your genetic makeup, right? Come on.
The letter E. Exposure describes the amount of radiation traveling through the air. The units for exposure are the Roentgen,
right,
and Coulomb, kilogram. The letter A. Absorbed dose describes the amount of radiation absorbed by an object or person. Right. The units for absorbed dose are the radiation absorbed dose, rad, and gray.
And some of you have probably seen some of these terminologies before, but we're going to get a lot in depth. We're going to be basically working on the dose equivalent, right? Come on.
The dose equivalent or effective dose combines the amount of radiation absorbed and the medical effects that type of radiation. Units for dose equivalent are the Roentgen equivalent man,
Rem,
right? Rem, and Sievert. And biological dose equivalents are commonly measured in 1/1000th of a rem, known as a millirem or
right.
mrem.
So on this diagram here, we have it's separated between non-ionizing radiation and ionizing radiation, right? We have your extremely low frequencies, which are your towers, your cell phone towers. We have very low frequencies, which are your computers. Then we have your radio waves, which links in anything with cell phones and microwaves, right? On the other spectrum, we have the light from the sun, ultraviolet radiation, X-rays like we talked about, right? And if you notice, that's on the ionizing part of the radiation, right? Frequency basically speaks to how frequent these waves are hitting your body, right? So something that has a low frequency, right? It's just a slow stream. They're not hitting you as often. Something that has a high frequency is hitting you often, right?
Radiation.
And one thing we have to understand about radiation is not just a one and done thing. It's very accumulative, right? It's an over time thing. It starts to show its sources down the line, right? Read that.
Radiation is accumulative, and you must know if the measurements you are looking at is for a single dose or a per hour dosage. This will make a significant difference in the danger you are in at the time. Radiation exposure intensity over X time can vary the outcome of possible health risks. Breathing in radiation or eating contaminated food, drink is a lot worse than direct body exposure.
Right, so why is that? Why is eating or ingesting something that's radioactive much worse than just breathing it in, right? Because you actually have filters in your nose, right? That's what your nose hairs are. They're filters for whenever you breathe in. When you actually ingest something, your body now expels that and sends it to different organs. So now you're internalizing that poison, right? This is the radiation dosage chart, right? World Nuclear Association is the source for this. And it classifies dental x-rays. This is all in millisieverts. It has dental x-rays at 0.01 millisieverts. But what's important to understand is that look at the 2.4 per year, a person's typical exposure to background radiation, right? If you think about one of the leading causes of cancer, right, which is, you see cancer up here at 100, lowest level linked to increased cancer risk. The biggest risk of cancer is age, right? Right, that's one of the biggest factors of cancer, your age. They say that people that are 65 generally and older are more susceptible to cancer. But if you look at it from this scale, if you're getting 2.4 background radiation a year, you multiply that by your age, you're naturally susceptible, right? Without any other thing included, right? So now you add in a dental X-ray, you add in, X-rays for whatever, and now you're adding in more and more. You throw in cell phones into that equation, you're adding in even more, right? So now this is why we can see a lot of young people now are coming up with cancer, right? Why is that, right? We're gonna get a little bit more into that. But on here, right? Let's just read through it some more. 250 allowable short-term dosage for workers controlling the 2011 Fukushima accident, right? If you look up at 1,000 sieverts or millisieverts, causes radiation sickness and nausea, but not death, likely to cause fatal cancer maybe years later in about 5 of every 100 persons exposed, right? You jump up to 3,000 millisieverts, survival rate approximately 50%, right? You jump up to 10,000, acute radiation poisoning, death within weeks, right? So if you understand that it's an accumulative process, there are ways to get rid of some of this radiation in your body, but you have to be mindful of that. You have to be mindful of the stuff that you're letting in as well, right? So is there a connection between, because a lot of time the cell phone companies say, you know what, there's no connection between radio frequency and, cell phones. There's no connection. It's a blurry line when it comes to that. Cell phones aren't controlling or detrimental to your health, right? But what does it say here?
Is there a connection between certain health problems and exposure to radio frequency fields via cell phone use? The results of most studies conducted to date indicate that there is not. In addition, attempts to replicate and confirm the few studies that did show a connection have failed.
Now, you picked that up? At first, they're saying that it's not, and then the few studies that they found that there was a cause, they tried to replicate it, and they weren't able to, right? But we're gonna get into that. Come on.
According to current data, the FDA believes that the weight of scientific evidence does not show an association between exposure to radio frequency from cell phones and adverse health outcomes. Still, there is consensus that additional research is warranted to address gaps in knowledge, such as the effects of cell phone use over the long term and on pediatric populations.
We have to understand that children are very susceptible to radiation. Wi-Fi, cell phones, extremely low frequencies, they're very susceptible because they're still developing themselves. So if they're exposed to this is why they say they have to watch out for pediatric populations, right? Now this is OSHA, right? Occupational Safety and Health Administration. This is what OSHA has to say about EFL.
Extremely low frequency fields include alternating current fields and other electromagnetic non-ionizing radiation from 1 Hz to 300 Hz. Extremely low frequency fields at 60 Hz are produced by power lines, electrical wirings, and electrical equipment. Some epidemiological studies have suggested increased cancer risk associated with magnetic field exposures near electrical power lines.
Now, this is OSHA. These are the people that are on the ground. This is not just an FDA worker that's in their office, drawing up policy, right? So this is OSHA. They're actually in the field, and they're noticing that there's some epidemiological studies have suggested increased cancer risk where you're near electrical power lines, right? But still, what do they say?
There are currently no specific OSHA standards that address extremely low frequency fields.
So what's going on here? If there's a need or there's a concern, why aren't they addressing it? Why aren't they putting this information out? Why aren't they fixing it? All right, we're going to get a little bit more into that. Now, this is the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer, right? And this is what they had to say about the fields. Come on.
The International Agency for Research on Cancer, through the Monographs program, seeks to identify environmental factors that can increase the risk of cancer in humans. IARC uses the following categories to classify environmental agents.
So they break it down to different categories, right? Group 1 is carcinogenic to humans. Group 2A, probably carcinogenic to humans. Group 2B, possibly carcinogenic to humans, so forth and so on, right? So they have classified radio frequency fields in group 2B, possibly carcinogenic to humans, right? And it interprets 2B classification as meaning there is a limited evidence showing radio frequencies carcinogenic in humans and less than sufficient evidence of carcinogenicity in experimental animals. We're not animals, right? So whatever test that they're testing on these little monkeys or rats, it's inconclusive, right? Because it doesn't apply to us, right? But for perspective, they has also classified other agents as possibly carcinogenic to humans. So ELF is on there with coffee and talcum-based body powder, right? So when I saw that, I had to do a little bit more research to see, how can these things be classified as possibly carcinogenic to humans? You got the notes on that?
Talcum powder is made from talc, a mineral made up mainly of the elements magnesium, silicon, and oxygen. As a powder, it absorbs moisture well and helps cut down on friction, making it useful for keeping skin dry and helping to prevent rashes.
Right. So we all, I know I've been there with putting baby powder, right after the shower, keep you nice and dry, right? Come on, what do they say about that?
It is widely used in cosmetic products such as baby powder and adult body and facial powders, as well as a number of other consumer products. In its natural form, some talc contains asbestos, a substance known to cause cancers in and around the lungs when inhaled. All talcum products used in homes in the United States have been asbestos-free since the 1970s.
Now that's according to the FDA, right? But we know that they have a track record of trying to eliminate things or monitor things that still slip through the cracks, right?
Most concerns about a possible link between talcum powder and cancer have been focused on whether people who have long-term exposure to natural talc fibers at work, such as talc miners, are at higher risk of lung cancer from breathing them in. Whether women who apply talcum powder regularly in the genital area have an increased risk of ovarian cancer.
So we start to see these connections start to be made when we're using these different products, and over time, we start to see the effects, right? What do they say about coffee?
A nonprofit group wants coffee manufacturers, distributors, and retailers to post ominous warnings about a cancer-causing chemical stewing in every brew, and has been presenting evidence in the Los Angeles courtroom to make its case. At the center of the dispute is acrylamide, a carcinogen found in cooked foods such as French fries, that is also a natural byproduct of the coffee roasting process.
Now, Brother Kenny had the presentation, Wickedness in High Places, when he went into acrylamide, right? So, but we have a different understanding of how or why that's seeping in to the coffee. You got a little bit more on that? Off the acrylamide.
Okay, yeah. So last time I gave the presentation, Wickedness in High Places, that was my first presentation. I had coffee on the screen, and I said I was going to come back to it later, and I completely forgot. That was like 2.5 years ago. But it's interesting that Brother Sean is actually going into this, so now I can actually bring it forth. So if you remember the situation with acrylamide is a chemical that's found in a lot of different foods, and it's said to form once the heat that's heating the food reaches the temperature of 250 degrees or higher. Then it forms to acrylamide, which is a known carcinogen. But what we found out later on is that the acrylamide is actually a mixture that's being put into the glyphosate pesticide, herbicide that's being sprayed on the crops throughout America, primarily used by Monsanto. And as far why it's in coffee, here's the reason why it's in coffee, and you guys can fact check this if you want. How many coffee drinkers we got in here? Wow. Okay. So y'all gonna wanna hear this. I'm going to start out by saying that if you, from here on out, whenever you drink coffee, just make sure it's caffeinated. Do not drink decaffeinated coffee. Okay, all right. Now,
come on.
Now I'm gonna tell you why. Okay. From what I've come across, there's really no such thing as decaffeinated coffee. Decaffeinated coffee is genetically modified coffee. The reason why they genetically modify it is because they have to first create a demand for decaffeinated coffee. And how they do that is by demonizing caffeine. What they do not tell you is that caffeine is the natural pesticide or herbicide put in the plant by the Most High. That's what keeps the insects from eating the plant, is the caffeine. It's a natural pesticide. Once they demonize the caffeine, they create that demand to have it removed from the plant by telling people that it's unhealthy and this and that and the other. Once they remove the caffeine through genetic modification, here comes the glyphosate, spraying the crops. And that's how you get the acrylamide in the coffee. And if you're drinking decaffeinated coffee, you're drinking the acrylamide, which is the carcinogen, giving you all sorts of cancer in the long term.
Right. The water. So, are there any health effects, right? Because we're back on the radio frequencies, the low frequencies. So, are there any health effects, right? Let's look at the short-term effects. Go ahead, Bill.
The short-term effects. Tissue heating is the principal mechanism of interaction between radio frequency energy and the human body.
So if you remember Sister Shayla's presentation, she went into the tissue heating, right, with the ultrasounds and whatnot, right? So it all ties together, right? Come on.
At the frequencies used by mobile phones, most of the energy is absorbed by the skin in our superficial tissues, resulting in negligible temperature rise in the brain or any other organs of the body. A number of studies have investigated the effects of radio frequency fields on brain electrical activity, cognitive function, sleep, heart rate, and blood pressure in volunteers. To date, research does not suggest any consistent evidence of adverse health effects from exposure to radio frequency fields at levels below those that cause tissue heating. Further, research has not been able to provide support for a causal relationship between exposure to electromagnetic fields and self-reported symptoms or electromagnetic hypersensitivity.
So that's just a convoluted way to say, you know, there's nothing wrong with it, right? But we're gonna get further deeper into it, right? Look at the let's look at the long-term effects.
Epidemiological research examining potential long-term risk from radio frequency exposure has mostly looked for an association between brain tumors and mobile phone use. However, because many cancers are not detectable until many years after the interactions that lead to the tumor, and since mobile phones were not widely used until the early 1990s, epidemiological studies at present can only assess those cancers that become evident within shorter time periods. However, results of animal studies consistently show no increased cancer risk for long-term exposure to radio frequency fields.
Now, it said that cell phones were not widely used until the early 1990s. We know that cell phones been around actually since the late 70s, early 80s, right? But when they first came out, they were these big, humongous bricks, and they cost about $3,500, right? But now, they actually became more affordable and more prevalent in the 1990s, right? Everyone has a cell phone nowadays, but it became more affordable and more prevalent in the 1990s. And I want you guys to just keep the 1990s in your mind, right? Because later down the line, I'm gonna show you why. So let's look at the exposure levels of the mobile phones.
Mobile phones are low-powered radio frequency transmitters operating at frequencies between 450 and 2700 megahertz, with peak powers in the range of 0.1 to 2 watts. The handset only transmits power when it is turned on.
And I forgot to mention that the reason they were looking at the link between brain tumors and the cell phones is because of the tissue heating, right? A lot of people were holding these phones up to their heads and speaking for long amounts of time, right? And this is why we now see a lot of them bringing out headsets or headphones. This wasn't prevalent when the cell phones first came out, right? So
the power and hence the radio frequency exposure to a user falls off rapidly with increased distance from the handset.
Right. So if you notice when you have remember your cordless phones back in the day, right? When you the further away you get from the base, it starts crackling. You get closer to it, right? So the further away you get, the harder it has to work, right? Therefore, those levels are going to increase, right? Come on.
A person using a mobile phone 30 to 40 centimeters away from their body, for example, when text messaging, accessing the internet, or using a hands-free device, will therefore have a much lower exposure to radio frequency fields than someone holding the handset against their head. In addition to using hands-free devices, which keep mobile phones away from the head and body during phone calls, exposure is also reduced by limiting the number and length of calls.
So if anybody who had a very long cell phone call, you can probably cook an egg on your phone, it's so hot, right? That's because it's just that exposure, that radio frequency is coming to it. It has to interact with it, right? So it's a big field now around you, and that's emanating from that source, right? Come on.
Using the phone in areas of good reception also decreases exposure, as it allows the phone to transmit at reduced power. The use of commercial devices for reducing radio frequency field exposure has not been shown to be effective. Mobile phones are often prohibited in hospitals and on airplanes, as the radio frequency signal may interfere with certain electromedical devices and navigation systems.
And we all know this. They tell you to turn your cell phones off in the hospital, right? They tell you to check it at the airport. You have to use the airline phone, right? If there's no causality, or if there's no background radiation going on, why do I have to turn it off in the hospital? If it can affect that, what is it doing to me, right? We're gonna talk about resonance, right? Because another effect that we have to understand is these waves, they resonate, right? I'm gonna let it explain itself. Come on, brother.
Resonance. Another effect independent of power level is resonance, which occurs at certain frequency ranges where the wavelength is near the size of a body part. An example is the 900 megahertz range, which has a wavelength of approximately 1 foot, a size that can cause resonance in a child's head because some of the radiation is absorbed and the wavelength decreases.
So wavelength, how you measure a wavelength is, when that other diagram we saw how the waves were going like this, if you measure the peak, from the peak, that's your wavelength, right? So things that have a long wavelength, right, approximately 1 foot, it can cause damage, right? Something that has a short wavelength is doing a lot more intensity to your body, but I just wanted to point that out.
This intensifies the biological effect. Also, children's skulls are thinner, so microwaves penetrate more easily.
Right.
Another problem is that children's cells are dividing rapidly, which creates more chance for DNA damage. Their immune systems are not fully developed and can't defend them against this.
Right, so this is why they're looking at the pediatric population, right? This is why there's all these warnings, right? But we're gonna watch a short video on resonance, just to give you an idea of some of the things that can occur, right? And what you're gonna see is they set up a water hose with a speaker set at certain frequencies, right? And keep in mind that our bodies are what? Primarily made of what? Right. So at certain frequencies, you can actually halt the water in this place, or change the dynamics in which the water flows. Now this is producing a forward effect at certain levels. The other one halted the water, right? This one's a forward effect. And at this level, you can actually reverse the water. So we're going to get into resonance, right? And the resonance frequencies. This is a model, it's a mechanical model of the human body, right? And every orifice or every extremity is labeled with a different hertz, meaning that if they wanted to target certain elements, they would then, turn up a different tone or a different hertz to target that particular element. Right? I don't know if anybody's ever heard of, there's a certain sound, and if there's any musicians in the house, there's a certain sound that can cause nausea in you. Bass, right? Right. So that plays off of the same thing. Your abdomen can only take about 4 to 8 hertz, right? Right. So just understand that this model here, it shows all the frequency ranges of the various body sections, right? Because we're going to get into some things on how they're targeting our bodies. Read the title of that.
Hold on, slow. I think I lost the. Give me 1 second.
This is electromagnetic frequency and mind control weapons. Human experiments in America, right? So when they talk about there's no connection between the cell phones and the low frequencies, we're going to start to understand why they're not putting out that information. Could they be using it for something else? All right. Come on.
Directed energy weapons include lasers, high-power microwaves, and millimeter wave models, among others. A relevant December 2007 Department of Defense report called them transformational game changer in military operations, able to augment and improve operational capabilities in many areas for both lethal and non-lethal purposes.
And I don't have a slide for this showing you the picture, but how many people have been following or know about the California wildfires, right? Now, when you start to look at some of the pictures, right, it seems as if there's one area that's been decimated, but the surrounding trees or little trees in between are still standing, right? It just selected what it wanted to destroy, right? You're looking at a directed energy weapon, right? Because they can focus that energy weapon on whatever they want to focus it on, right?
Among other applications, EMF weapon devices are used for harassment, surveillance, and mind control. Agencies like the Pentagon, CIA, and NSA use them to monitor people, manipulate their minds, harm, and at times kill them. The Navy Times called them the most feared and controversial weapons of the modern age.
So when you talk about manipulating people's minds with frequencies, some people be like, come on, man, they can't do that, right? But can they? Let's go a little deeper in the rabbit hole.
Electromagnetic frequency mind control weapons. Begun in 1953, it was the code name for a secret CIA mind control program to perfect a truth drug. It followed earlier World War II hypothesis, primitive drug hypnosis,
Right.
primitive drug research in the U.S. Navy's Project Chatter, identifying and testing drugs on both animal and human subjects. These and other experiments aim to control human behaviors through psychedelic and hallucinogenic drugs, electroshock, radiation, graphology, paramilitary techniques, and various psychological, sociological, anthropological methods, among others.
So they started testing these things back in the 50s, right? Come on.
They comprise a vast open field of mind experimentation, using anything that might work, legal or not, unwilling and unwitting subjects. For example, Dr. Ross Adey worked on the CIA's Pandora project, using microwaves to send signals to human brains.
So they use microwaves to send signals to the human brain, and this is what they found.
Cataloging the results, he showed how they affected emotional and pathological states. He also learned that the human brains could be controlled remotely through extremely low frequency modulated microwave beams, able to cause psychological and physical harm.
So they found out that through extremely low frequency modulated beams, they was able to control psychologically and do physical harm, right? You wonder why there's so many more cell phone towers now popping up everywhere, right? Come on.
People could be turned into zombies, their minds easily controlled. Physical harm also resulted, affecting their blood, cardiovascular systems, cells, central nervous and digestive systems, glands, metabolism, reproduction, eyesight, and hearing. In addition, subjects could be made suicidal or driven mad. Moreover, sounds and speech can be placed in victims' brains, actual voices they can't control or stop.
Right? And this was in the 50s. Now, other effects include unexplainable burning, itching, tickling or pressure, humming or buzzing, causing sleeplessness and anxiety, right? The tinnitus, that ringing, constant ringing in your ear, that's not natural, right? Loss of body control, producing sudden twitching or jerking of an arm or leg, or feeling of dread, rage, lust, sorrow, or other emotions that come and go quickly, right? These are all commandments that are broken right here. What are they pumping into the population? Moreover, microwave cooking can heat people to death by increasing radiation field intensity, causing local hot spots in eyes, gallbladders, and other body parts. Paralysis can also be induced. Memories are erased or impaired. Cancerous cells can be produced, and behavior modified the way authorities wish, even turning people into killers. Microwave signals directing them. The entire mobile phone network can be used for these purposes. So all of these, we watch on the news constantly these lone assassins, lone gunmen, right? Sleeper cells, right? But all of these are connected. They're all connected, right? They can be easily targeted, manipulated, and directed because they have the technology for it. And this is by no means a fear campaign, because we're going to understand that, these things can be controlled. What you got on that? Come on up.
Electromagnetic frequency mind control weapons. Electronic harassment and mind control technologies direct energy through lasers, radio frequency energy beams, holography, interferometry, electromagnetic radiation, radio and sound waves, satellites, radar, miniature electronic robots, smart dust, and other means.
So smart dust, right? Like, what's smart dust? You got the notes on that?
This is It says in the 1990s, a researcher named Chris Pister.
So we're back to the 1990s, right? Remember that date? That was a big year, right? Come on.
Chris Pister dreamed up a wild future in which people would sprinkle the earth with countless tiny sensors, no larger than grains of rice.
Right?
These smart dust particles, as he called them, would monitor everything, acting like electronic nerve endings for the planet. Fitting with computing power, sensing equipment, wireless radios, and long battery life, the smart dust would make observations and relay mountains of real-time data about people, cities, and the natural environment.
That was in the 1990s, right? What else we got on that?
As far as the notes are right
No, right here.
Okay. Picking up at the first paragraph, all do it invisibly over thousands of miles. They can penetrate walls, buildings, metals, concrete, mountains, and thousands of miles of Earth. Intersecting energy beams create radiation pockets and victims, engineered to control sound waves, messages, heat, and pressure stress, stimulated forms of electromagnetic radiation, telepathic images, as well as holographic and virtual reality simulations. Directed energy beams can also track, locate, and target people harmfully. They can only be blocked by force fields or materials that absorb or deflect them.
So it says they can only be blocked by force fields or materials that absorb or deflect them. What they are remain top secret. Well, we know what that force field is, right? Because they don't understand it, that there's a hedge that the Most High provides for his people, right? And they can't manipulate it, they can't understand it, they're trying to tune into the right frequency, but the Most High deals with fuck direct, right? So we're on a whole different wavelength, right? But come on.
Bush the first
Bush, right?
declared the 1990s the decade of the brain.
So the 1990s was declared the decade of the brain. And is there any coincidence that cell phones and all these different technologies are now coming out?
He declared the 1990s the decade of the brain, in effort to enhance public awareness of the benefits to be derived from brain research, keeping its dark side hidden.
Right? So there's always a hidden agenda. Come on.
The Pentagon's DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, conducted research and development in augmented cognition, what universities call cognitive science. It's the interdisciplinary study of how information is presented and transformed in the brain. The Pentagon's purpose was for military applications, including manipulating the emotions and behaviors of adversaries. Used globally, it's applicable individually for crowd control or larger groups using millimeter waves, pulse energy projectiles, and high-powered magnetic weapons.
Right? So let us deal wisely with these people, lest they join to their enemies. Right? And we'll just give you just a brief overview of what some of those technologies are being used on us. Right? Come on.
The NSA's signal intelligence. I guess let me start over. The NSA's signal intelligence involves decoding EMF waves to tap the computers wirelessly and track people. Using EMF brain simulation to monitor individuals, organizations, and nations, it complements the CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, Human Intelligence, and National Geopolitical Intelligence Agencies, Imagery Intelligence. NSA's DOMINT can track millions of people simultaneously. It can also inflict harm, control subjects psychologically, and kill. In conflict zones like Iraq and Afghanistan, Project Sheriff is used to give troops working in urban terrain more options against combatants and non-combatants alike. Humvees and armored personnel carriers have been retrofitted with non-lethal weapons, including microwaves like pain rays, and an active denial system, and a long-range acoustic device emitting ear-splitting sounds.
So they're using frequencies and they're using resonance, right? These are the two things that they're using. And all of this might sound far-fetched. Hold on. I think it's the next slide. But we're gonna get into, I'm gonna hold it. We're gonna get to it. Go ahead.
Electromagnetic frequency mind control weapons. Pulse energy projectiles travel nearly at the speed of light. With pinpoint accuracy, they emit invisible laser pulses.
Now it says nearly at the speed of light because no one can travel as fast as Yeshaya, huh? Right? Come on.
Electromagnetic radiation, stunning targets, knocking them off their feet, paralyzing them in pain. Nearly long-term effects, however unknown, including on the brain.
And now it says voice-to-skull directed acoustic devices are neuroelectromagnetic non-lethal weapons able to produce mood-altering sounds in a person's head. Right? Remote neural monitoring uses satellite-transmitted extra-low frequencies to send voices to brain communications. Right? So now we're seeing why or how they're using these low frequencies. So they're not going to come out and say that these things are detrimental to you if they're using it for a different cause or a different reason. Right?
Long range.
Long range acoustic devices are used for crowd control, and they produce about 150 decibel acoustic beams designed to communicate with authority and exceptionally high intelligible in a 15 to 30 degree beam. Right? They emit verbal challenges over distances beyond 500 meters with warning tones to influence behavior. They can also inflict physical harm, manipulate minds, and cause death. Right? The field of augmented cognition includes transcranial magnetic stimulation used therapeutically and for military purposes. Right? What's the therapeutic cause or reason for that? Right? To augment your brain. Right? The latter is to emit close proximity electrical impulses to the brain to affect mood, sleep patterns, and improve cognitive abilities in areas of learning, memory, attentiveness, visualizations, and decision making. The long-term neurological effects are unknown. The potential for human harm is considerable. Right? This is what they have to say about extremely low frequencies. So the military has developed smaller weapon systems for use in battlefield applications, and these new weapons were disclosed in documents authored and compiled by the United States Air Force. The Air Force documents indicate that these weapons can be used for mind control, inducing heart attacks, causing electronic failures, and creating computer malfunctions. More recently, these new weapons have been revealed in International Red Cross documents and in other press reports. In a CBS 60-minute broadcast on February 11th, 1996, a report on some of these new systems was shown. The program discussed some of the effects of these new weapons, which include disorientation and flu-like symptoms, right? Why do we have so many vaccinations? You can go to your local supermarket and get a flu vaccination, right? They offer it for free now, right? There's a connection between all of this, right? But we're gonna look at, come on. These are the different patents that the US applied for. And let's just read through a couple of them, right? In order to get a patent, you have to prove something works, right? So these are the patents that and you can write down these patent numbers and research them for yourself, right? You got that up? Let's read through a couple.
The first one, method of changing a person's behavior.
Right?
Subliminal message generator.
Right?
Method and system for altering consciousness.
Right?
hearing system,
Come on.
communication system, and method including brainwave analysis and or the use of brain activity.
So these are all the things that we were talking about before that NSA, CIA, that they're using, right? And they have patents on all of these devices. What else you got?
We go jump to the next column. Method and associated apparatus for remotely determining information as to a person's emotional state.
Right, so they can look up, oh man, person 8419 is feeling sad right now. Let's send them out some happiness, some false happiness, some fake light. Right, come on.
Subliminal acoustic nervous system, ultrasonic speech translator and communication system, personal tracking and recovery system, interoral tracking device, speech signal processing for determining psychological or physiological characteristics using a knowledge base, barcode tattoo.
Right, and that last one, it kind of stood out at me when I saw barcode tattoo, because it didn't fit in with the other ones, right? But let's read what a barcode tattoo is.
U.S. patent for barcode tattoo. Method for verifying human identity during electronic sale transactions. A method is presented for facilitating sales transactions by electronic media. A barcode or a design is tattooed on an individual. Before the sales transaction can be consummated, the tattoo is scanned with a scanner. Characteristics about the scanned tattoo are compared to characteristics about other tattoos stored on a computer's database in order to verify the identity of the buyer.
Right.
Once verified, the seller may be authorized to debit the buyer's electronic bank account in order to consummate the transaction. The seller's electronic bank account may be similarly updated.
Right, so that's mark on the hand, right? Mark on the forehead. Can't buy or sell. They got a patent for it. They got a patent for the mark of the beast right there. U.S. patent 5878155. We're going to switch gears a little bit because we started off talking about extremely low frequencies. So I want to pose a question. What device is responsible for sterilization, increased cancer rates, and is found in 9 out of 10 homes in the United States? Somebody said TV. Somebody said cell phones, Wi-Fi's. Heard. Well, we're going to get the answer right now. Is that your final answer? You want to use a lifeline? All right. Right? We're going to get some understanding about this microwave in our house.
All right. Fact. Russians banned the microwave oven after extensive studies.
And it's funny because the United States has always seemed to be the last ones on board. They just ignore what everybody else is doing, right? Because they have a different agenda altogether, right? But come on.
Microwaves were the first invented by the Nazis in order to provide a method of cooking for their troops during World War II. Seen as though these microwaves oven have been experimental and new, the U.S. War Department was assigned to research these new devices shortly after the war. Turns out the U.S. didn't really perform the extensive research necessary for the new invention.
Right, when we see that a lot, we get a lot of prescription drugs out there that's not tested, right? They don't have any kind of protocol for testing these things. They just administer them to the public, right? And then they backtrack or they try to cover it up, right?
Instead, the Russians decided to tackle the issue with extreme force. Intrigued by this new device, the Russians conducted an in-depth research to discover the biological effects they might possess. The results were staggering enough to lead to a ban of the new device in the Soviet Union. The ban, however, was later lifted by perestroika, the political movement and responsible for the restructuring of the Soviet Union.
So when you look into the restructuring of the Soviet Union, America had a big hand in that, right? So it's no coincidence that they're saying, you know what, don't worry about that, Ben, we're going to have our microwaves back. Microwaving food leads to a negative impact on human physiology and the heart, right? Now, Hans Hertel was a Swiss food scientist. He initiated the first test on microwave food and microwave cooking to determine how microwaves affect human physiology and the blood. After studying these effects, he concluded that microwaving food leads to food degeneration. These degenerative changes in nutrients cause changes in blood, which can cause health problems. Health issues which could be caused are elevated cholesterol levels, a plummet in leukocytes, white blood cells, which could suggest poisoning, decreased red blood cells, production of radiolytic compounds, decreased hemoglobin levels, which might indicate anemia, right? And this is all from just microwaving your food. It's stripping it of its nutrients, right? Because how a microwave works, it actually excites the water molecules that's already present, right? And once it gets it to a certain temperature, it just expels all of the nutrients that are inside of it. That's why if you notice, if you put a plate of food in the microwave, some of your food can be hot and some of it can be really cold. And a lot of times people will sprinkle water or put a cover over top to increase the condensation, right? So it can be evenly distributed. So the dangers of microwaves and their effects on our food, right? Read some of those, brother.
The findings include carcinogenic substances were formed from the microwaving of nearly all foods tested.
Right.
Microwaving milk and grains resulted in carcinogenic substances being formed through the conversion of amino acids. Microwaving prepared meats caused cancer-causing agents such as, nitrodiethylamides.
If it's that long of a word, it can't be good for you.
It cannot be
right?
good. It's horrible. To form microwaving fruits as a method of thawing resulted in the conversion of glucoside and galactoside fractions.
My bad. And I'm looking at these like microwaving milk and grains. I used to microwave my milk for my oatmeal, right? I remember we used to thaw out the meat, right? You throw it in the microwave to help it thaw. You don't want to leave it in the sink with the running water all day. You want to kind of hurry up, right? So all of these are applicable, right? Go ahead, brother.
Oh. Extremely short exposure of raw, cooked, or frozen vegetables converted their plant alkaloids into carcinogens. Carcinogenic free radicals were formed in microwave plants, especially root vegetables. Structural degradation leading to decreased food value was found to be 60 to 90% overall for all foods tested, with significant decreases in bioavailability of B-complex vitamins and vitamins C and E, essential minerals, and lipotropics.
Right, and they conducted this study for 20 years, right?
20 years of the Russian research led to the international warning about the damaging biological and environmental effects of microwaves possess.
And look what else they included in that warning.
The warning also included other similar frequency electronic devices such as cell phones.
Right? So we see the direct connection between the frequencies that are used because they're on that same, as we remember the chart, they're in that same area. Now, you may suffer from microwave sickness if tissues directly exposed to microwaves are subject to the same deformities molecules go through, right? So you can turn, and this can in turn cause you to experience microwave sickness, right? So remember, isn't microwave ovens which emit this kind of radiation. Cell phone towers also emit this type of radiation. right? People may experience any or all of the following after being exposed to high levels of microwave radiation: impaired cognition, nausea, vision problems, depression and irritability, weakened immune system, headaches, dizziness, insomnia and or sleep disturbances, frequent urination and extreme thirst, right? And most of these people will run right to their doctor, and the doctor will say, you know what, let me give you a generic prescription for something, or you need some antibiotics, right? Or have you had your flu shot yet, brother, sister? Have you had your flu shot yet? Right. So it's all tied together, right? Any notes on it?
Yeah. Robert O. Becker, author of The Body Electric, stated the following on page 314 of his book, Its microwave sickness first signs are low blood pressure and slow pulse. The later and most common manifestations are chronic excitation of the sympathetic nervous system, or stress syndrome, and high blood pressure. This phase also often includes headaches, dizziness, eye pain, sleeplessness, irritability, and anxiety, stomach pain, nervous tension, inability to concentrate, hair loss, plus an increased incidence of appendicitis, cataracts, reproductive problems, and cancer. The chronic symptoms are eventually succeeded by crisis of adrenal exhaustion and ischemic heart disease, the blockage of coronary arteries, and heart attacks. That's it.
Right. So all of that is, you got a headache, you're nauseated, you're feeling a little sick, you're feeling a little weak. You wouldn't necessarily attribute it to your microwave that's sitting in your house. Right, but these things are generating waves. You wouldn't attribute it to your cell phone that's sitting by you constantly. Right, but these things, when they're on, they're generating these frequencies, and it's doing detrimental harm to our bodies. Right, come on.
You may suffer from microwave sickness. In another book entitled Health Effects of Microwave Radiation, author Dr. Lita Lee also expressed his concern over the use of microwaves. Dr. Lee observed that the symptoms listed prior could be caused by certain observations shown below. Lymphatic disorders were observed, leading to decreased ability to prevent certain types of cancers.
So it's saying that by using microwaves or being exposed to these frequencies, it's eliminating your body's natural ability to fight off these cancers.
An elevated rate of cancer cell formation was observed in the blood. Increased rates of stomach and intestinal cancers were observed. Higher rates of digestive disorders and gradual breakdown of the system of elimination were observed.
And they have a pill for every one of these, right? We see these commercials on television. Are you sick? Are you got irritable bowel syndrome? Are you nauseated? Right? These generic symptoms that doesn't seem to apply to anything, they always have a commercial or a drug for it, right?
Yeah. Hans Hertel, a Swiss scientist, states, there are no atoms, molecules, or cells of any organic system able to withstand such a violent, destructive power for any extended period of time, not even in the low energy range of milliwatts. This is how microwave cooking heat is generated. Friction from this violence in water molecules. Structures of molecules are torn apart. Molecules are forcefully deformed, called structural isomerism, and thus become impaired in quality.
Right. And we're going to talk about dirty electricity, right? Dirty electricity is erratic spikes and surges of electrical energy traveling along power lines and building wiring where only standard 50 to 60 hertz AC electricity should be. Also called electrical noise, line noise, and power line EMI. It is one of the fastest growing source of electro pollution in homes, schools, and businesses today. So when you look at a lot of older homes, right? Shalaga. So when you look at electrical noise, a lot of the older homes, they'll only have the two-prong outlet. They won't have that third that you need, right? So you have to have an extension cord, and then you have a surge protector, right? But the problem is that we're hooking up all these different lines to the surge protector, not knowing that it's emanating dirty electricity, right? Because it's not meant to have all of that power running through it, right? So dirty electricity is created by many electronics, appliances, energy-efficient lights, and other devices that run on electricity. It is more common now than ever before. Why? Because many modern devices no longer use the AC electricity as is. Instead, they must manipulate electrical current in one way or another in order to operate, right? So a lot of the newer technologies, like we said, they're using a certain type of frequency, and a lot of the older homes are not equipped for that, so you now have to use a converter, and now when you convert it, you now have a dirty electricity. Any notes on that?
No.
So common sources of dirty electricity, right? Once created, this unusable dirty electricity spreads throughout a building and even to other buildings via wiring and power lines. As it travels, it radiates potentially harmful electromagnetic fields into living and work environments. So you got your light dimmer switches, right? Lights should only be on or off, right? When you dim it, right, it's in between, right? It's drawing more energy than it needs to, right? It's not a natural state of its being, right? Hot or cold, lukewarm, you get spewed out, right? Fluorescent light bulbs and tubes, computers and laptops, printers and scanners, just the amount of heat alone that a computer, laptop emits, right? They tell you now not to sit it on your lap because of that transference of energy, right? Televisions, music entertainment systems, video game systems, cordless phone systems, smart meters and appliances, Wi-Fi routers and modems, battery charging devices for cell phones, tablets, etc., microwave ovens, blenders and mixers, hair dryers, multi-speed fans, solar power systems, right? Any notes on that?
No, not a note.
So I went into a little bit more on the smart meters because now they're starting to implement those smart meters throughout the country, right? You see a lot of that going on now, right? Go ahead and read that, brother.
A smart meter is an electronic device that records consumption of electric energy in intervals of an hour or less of communicates and communicates that information at least daily back to the utility or monitoring and billing. For monitoring and billing, Salaki. Smart meters enable two-way communication between the meter and the central system. Unlike home energy monitors, smart meters can gather data for remote reporting.
Right.
Many countries are promoting wireless communications on a community-wide scale for energy management and conservation. The smart grid concepts could require every home to have a wireless electric and gas meter in place of their existing meters. If implemented, it will greatly increase the intensity of the new wireless emissions in homes, schools, and every other building that uses electricity and gas.
So we're starting to see that grid emerge, that grid that they've been building around the enemies, right? Right? They have to deal wisely, right? They're not going to just come out and say that they're doing these things. It's going to be, so they have to slowly implement these policies in order now to get you cornered. There's notes on that?
Yeah.
What you got?
Press release from the Karolinska Institute, Department of Neuroscience, Stockholm, Sweden, February 3rd, 2011. The combined effect of cell phone, cordless phones, cell towers, Wi-Fi, and wireless internet place billions of people around the world at risk for cancer, neurological disease, and reproductive and developmental impairments.
Right. So this is showing you that all that information that they're saying that, cell phones, there's no direct cause or causality, they're showing you that there is, once of all, there is, right? And that they're using it for different reasons. So we're going to go into some of these ailments that people have been diagnosed with, and we'll see if there's a connection between the dirty electricity and some of the natural or some of the ailments that people are diagnosed with. So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, right?
There are three core types of ADHD: inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. It is important to understand that attentional problems are actually a result of not being able to regulate attention, not just being unable to pay attention. Overfocusing can be a major problem as well.
Now, we saw all of those different slides or the patterns on ways they can manipulate a person's brain using these fields, right? So let's look.
Recent research has indicated there may be a causal link between exposure to EMF pollution and the development of ADD and ADHD. Making a concerted effort to control the amount of EMF pollution in your home may limit and even eradicate symptoms of ADHD, observed both in children and adults.
Right, so being conscientious of eliminating a lot of dirty electricity. If you have 2 outlets, put 2 things in it, right? Do you need extension cord or surge protectors to put 6, 7 different devices in? Probably not. You're not going to use them all at once. So that electricity is constantly flowing, right? So just be mindful that if you have 2 outlets, use 2 things. If you're not using it, unplug it, right? That way it's not drawing that electricity. And these recent studies are showing that HDHD is caused by there's a lot of noise, background noise. Now, what they have implemented in that noise, we may not know. But we've seen that they have the technology to implement different things in that noise. So is that causing some of these people to not be able to focus, right? Asthma. So there's a lot of different things that contribute to asthma attacks, right? It can be pollen, air, whatever the case may be. And then it says occupational factors, right? Read the notes on that.
Recent research has indicated that limiting one's exposure to dirty electricity may significantly reduce the severity and duration of asthmatic symptoms.
Right, so just again, we're seeing a pattern emerge. Eliminating a lot of that background noise or background information, you'll start to see your symptoms alleviate. All right, let's skip one. No. Cancer.
Recent research has uncovered an alarming increase in cancer rates amongst groups of people who are exposed to high-frequency voltage transients and EMF pollution. Types of cancers observed have included, but are not limited to, melanoma, breast, uterus, and thyroid cancer.
And we're seeing a large rate of our people, especially in the communities, coming out or falling out with these different diagnoses, right? And it's like, where is this coming from? They try to say, some of these questions they ask, has your grandmother been, they want to know your family history, right? But a lot of cases, a lot of it is just that background radiation, right? And all the additive things that we do on top of it, right? Not unbeknownst to ourselves.
As well as childhood and adult leukemia. The relatively short latency time of melanoma and thyroid cancer suggests that these cancers might be more sensitive to the effects of high voltage transients than other manifestations of this disease. Published scientific studies have linked EMF pollution exposure to brain and eye cancer, as well as tumors of the auditory nerves and salivary glands. Unavoidable exposure to carcinogenic pathogens in the air, food, household products, and medications mean that it is even more important to limit exposure to other possible causes of cancer whenever we can.
Now it says unavoidable exposure to carcinogenic pathogens in the air, food, household products, and medications, right? But we know that if you're mindful of these things, you can now take steps to avoid certain things. Right? It's just about being mindful of what you're putting into your temple, right? So these things can be avoided, and there are natural remedies that we're going to get into. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2 as to how you can start eliminating that, because that's more of a personal thing. We're not doctors here. We can't give medical advice, but we can steer you in the right direction, right? Cardiac issues.
Many people who suffer from cardiac problems have found those health issues to be aggravated by exposure to EMF pollution. These symptoms have manifested themselves in such ways as heart palpitations, arrhythmia, pain or pressure in the chest, low or high blood pressure, slow or fast heart rate, shortness of breath, and interference with pacemakers. Hospitals and other healthcare facilities have long issued bans on wireless devices because of their potential to disrupt medical equipment.
So they'll ban it in the hospital, but they'll give you a pacemaker and send you home to your microwave and your cell phone, right? You got to ride the train, that automated system that comes on, that's all radiation, right? All of these speakers, monitors, Wi-Fi routers, that's all in the air, right? So it's always affecting us. CFS, or chronic fatigue syndrome.
Chronic fatigue syndrome is a condition causing persistent fatigue that lasts for at least 6 months or longer, and isn't due to another medical condition, such as hyperthyroidism. It was once thought to affect only highly educated young adults who were high achievers or career-oriented professionals.
Right, because they're saying that these people are so motivated that they get burnt out, and but
it is now known that CFS affects people of all ages from all walks of life. CFS is about 2 to 4 times more common in women than men. It is associated with extreme and prolonged fatigue that isn't relieved by rest.
You ever just so tired, you take a nap and then you get up and you still feel tired? It's like, because we're constantly being bombarded, right? So we feel heavy at times, right?
People with CFS experience persistent tiredness so severe that it prevents them from working, exercising, and enjoying life. CFS is a poorly understood condition, and there is no clear consensus about its diagnosis and treatment. With those who have taken steps to reduce the amount of EMF pollution in their homes and workplaces have reported marked improvements in their symptoms and overall health.
And see, when you're in the cities, there's a certain heaviness that falls on you. But everybody here that was at the Tabernacles, there was a different vibration there. There was a different frequency there. The Most High was just lifting our spirits, and we were just elated, right? All praises, right? So it shows you that force field is real. Come on. Diabetes.
Exposure to electromagnetic pollution in its various forms may account for higher plasma glucose levels and may contribute to the misdiagnosis of diabetes.
So when we talk about these beams that are radiating in you and changing your levels, you now go get a checkup at your doctor, and they're seeing your glucose levels are off. You might get misdiagnosed with diabetes. And now when you take the medication, now you really throw off your insulin levels or your sugar producing levels, and now you do have diabetes. Right?
Studies have shown that glucose levels in both type 1 and type 2 diabetes respond to electromagnetic pollution in the form of radio frequencies associated with dirty electricity.
Anything else on that? Any notes? Electrical sensitivities.
Electrical hypersensitivity, or EHS, can be difficult to understand and even more difficult for doctors to diagnose. Many doctors and other health professionals here in North America are not yet aware of the recent scientific evidence surrounding dirty electricity and its effects on human health. So many victims are treated with pharmaceuticals deemed mentally ill or left untreated.
And that ties in again to the other presentation that was done with the mental illness, right? Because a lot of times we get misdiagnosed. We go to the hospital with a chronic headache or just what we would deem a normal symptom of something we don't know where it emanates from, and we get diagnosed and fed prescription drugs. Or we get locked up. If we say we hear voices, you know they're gonna lock you up, right? Even if those voices were put into your head, right?
According to a December 2005 press release issued by the World Health Organization, is a growing worldwide health concern. The World Health Organization's definition of electrical hypersensitivity. EHS is characterized by a variety of nonspecific symptoms which afflicted individuals attribute to exposure to EMF. The symptoms most commonly experienced include dermatological symptoms, redness, tingling, and burning sensations, as well as neurasthenic and vegetative symptoms, fatigue, tiredness, concentration, difficulties, dizziness, nausea, heart palpitations, and digestive disturbances.
And look at the cliff note on that. They say the collection of symptoms is not part of any recognized syndrome. That's by the World Health Organization, fact sheet number 296, and they published that in December 2005. General symptoms of electrical hypersensitivity.
Neurological. Headaches, dizziness, nausea, difficulty concentrating, memory loss, irritability, depression, anxiety, insomnia, fatigue, weakness, tremors, muscle spasms, numbness, tingling, altered reflexes, muscle and joint pain, leg, foot pain, flu-like symptoms, fever. More severe reactions can include seizures, paralysis, psychosis, and stroke.
Right. That's just from the neurological point of view. What's the cardiac say?
Cardiac, palpitations, arrhythmias, pain or pressure in the chest, low or high blood pressure, slow or fast heart rate, shortness of breath, respiratory, sinusitis, bronchitis, pneumonia, asthma.
And these are all byproducts of that electrical hypersensitivity, right? Because if you're hypersensitive to these things and you still have them around, you're going to come down with some of these symptoms. So if you're seeing these symptoms, then you have to be mindful of your surroundings and you're mindful of the things that you can control in your household, right?
Dermatological, skin rash, itching, burning, facial flushing. Ophthalmologic, pain,
Go ahead.
pain or burning in the eyes, pressure in or behind the eyes, deteriorating vision, floaters, cataracts. Others, digestive problems, abdominal pain, enlarged thyroid, testicular ovarian pain, dryness of lips, tongue, mouth, eyes, great thirst, dehydration, nosebleeds, internal bleeding, altered sugar metabolism, immune abnormalities, redistribution of metals within the body, hair loss, pain in the teeth, deteriorating filings, impaired sense of smell, ringing in the ears.
Right? That tinnitus that we talked about.
That kind of sounded like the warnings for like a Zoloft commercial or something.
Right, right,
Prozac or something.
right. Because they said before that all of these, they don't have a syndrome for it. They can't attach it to a syndrome, but they know the root cause of it. So now they can create a lot of these prescription drugs on the back end that, you know, are you experiencing? And this is a vast variety of symptoms, right? Some of us in this room is probably having or coming down with some of these symptoms right now, right? Fibromyalgia.
The correlation between fibromyalgia and EMFs is only beginning to be recognized. A government agency, such as the United Kingdom, has acknowledged for the first time that people can suffer nausea, headaches, and muscle pains when exposed to electromagnetic fields from mobile phones, electricity pylons, and computer screens.
Right, so this stuff is now just starting to get out because the long-term effects are now showing their end, right? Because when it first started in the 1990s, when it was more prevalent, we couldn't see it. All we could see was the short term, right? Linked to the brain cancer because of the heating. But now we're starting to see the long-term effects. And a lot of agencies are starting to come out and speak against it and link a lot of the diseases and ailments that we have attributed to that, right? Because if it's ramped up more and more, you're going to see more and more symptoms or diseases sprung out of it. Now, we talked about headaches a lot, right? One of the most commonly reported symptoms related to EMF pollution is dirty electricity in the home and has frequent and persistent headaches with no other discernible underlying cause. Immediate relief from headaches has been one of the most common and widespread results of reducing dirty pollution in the home. But what do they tell you to do if you're experiencing a headache? Take some Advil, take some ibuprofen, right? Take something for that headache. But let's see what ibuprofen does, right? The FDA strengthens warning on heart attack and stroke risk for non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs, right? Read that bottom part.
Prescription NSAIDs are an important treatment for the symptoms of many debilitating conditions, including osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, gout, and other rheumatological and painful conditions. OCT NSAIDs are used, NSAIDs are used to temporarily reduce fever and to treat minor aches and pains such as headaches, toothaches, backaches, muscular aches, tendinitis, strains, sprains, and menstrual cramps.
But see, that the problem is that a lot of people started to either have heart attacks or they started to see a lot of adverse effects, so they had to strengthen up their warning for that. I just wanted to show you that a lot of times we attribute or we're quick to go to a drug to alleviate the symptom when all we have to do is just be mindful of our environment and what's around it and what's causing it instead of trying to throw a Band-Aid on it, right? We have to get to the root cause of the problem in order to fix it. Multiple sclerosis.
MS is an autoimmune disease, which is a condition in which an individual's immune system starts reacting against his or her own tissues. Symptoms may include bladder or bowel problems, sexual problems, muscle stiffness or spasms, cognitive problems, dizziness or sensations of spinning, mental health problems, speech or swallowing problems, shaking, vision problems.
And now they're starting to see a lot of testimonials from people who are actually taking steps to reduce the EMF pollution in their homes, right? Read with that.
Testimonials for people who have taken steps to reduce the EMF pollution in their homes have repeatedly asserted a marked improvement in symptoms caused by MS almost immediately after reducing the amount of the dirty electricity they were exposed to.
Right, so it's a direct connection, right? Tinnitus, that ringing in the air that we spoke about.
Tinnitus is, by definition, a subjective ringing or tingling in the air that can only be heard by the person experiencing it. The noise can be described in many ways: a humming, buzzing, ringing, whistling, clicking, throbbing, or roaring. It is often a symptom of another underlying problem. Many people with tendinitis also have lost some or most of their hearing. In some cases, it is the hearing loss that ends up causing the problem. The worst part of tinnitus is that it can be very annoying and difficult to live with. A soft ringing sound might not be too bothersome to most, but some people hear very loud sounds over long periods of time, or sounds that go away only to return just as they get used to the silence again. This can affect sleep, concentration, and quality of life. EMF pollution has been shown to contribute to tinnitus for some people, and have taken steps to reduce the amount of dirty electricity in one's environment has resulted in eradication of the symptoms of tinnitus in many cases.
So a lot of what you're hearing for people who are suffering with tinnitus is that background radiation, right? The cell phone towers, the microwaves, it's that background radiation that you can pick up on it. You may be hypersensitive. So if you can hear that ringing, you may be dealing with other symptoms that are linked to that hypersensitivity, right? And one thing you should never probably do is, you know, I used to use my cell phone as an alarm, right? So I used to have it in my bed next to me, right? That thing should be either off or out your room. Get an alarm clock, right? If you have a microwave, 86 that thing. Get it out of there, right? Job 5:7.
This is the book of Job, chapter 5, verse 7. Yet man is born unto trouble, as the sparks fly upward.
As the what?
As the sparks fly upward.
Come on.
I would seek unto the Most High, and unto the Most High would I commit my cause, which doeth great things and unsearchable, marvelous things without number, who giveth rain upon the earth, and sendeth waters upon the fields, to set up on high those that be low, and those which mourn may be exalted to safety.
Come on.
He disappointeth the devices of the crafty.
He did what?
He disappointeth the devices of the crafty, so that their hands cannot perform their enterprise.
Right? So he confounds them in their own mischief, right? It says that, I forget the scripture, but if you notice, a lot of times he'll take the same thing that they're trying to do, like I'll give you an example, the Chernobyl accident, right? So they're developing nuclear reactors or trying to pump out a lot of nuclear devices, right? So what happened there? He disappointed their craftiness. He just turned that whole thing and just exploded it. So now it's not going to fester all, or they wouldn't be able to gain that edge in that war that they're fighting against us, right? So read number 12 again. Start at 11.
Verse 11. To set up on high places those that be low.
Right, those that be low, right?
That those which mourn may be exalted to safety. Verse 12. He disappointeth the devices of the crafty.
He disappointed the devices of the crafty. There's no need to fear these devices because he's gonna turn them off, right? We have that force field that they can't comprehend. We have that frequency that the Most High tuned us into that they can't tune into, right? So all of this is that understanding that we're guarded by the grace of the Most High. And we have to finish the fight. We have to finish that walk, right? He who endures, the same shall be saved, right? So understanding that, their hands cannot perform the enterprise. And we're going to prevail if we stick with the law, statutes, and commandments that the Most High given us. And we stick with the knowledge that he's sending us in order to understand where we're at in this society. Let's give the Most High a hand.
Cast off the burdens of man. Let go